was having some issues getting here. I know she's on her way, so she may be dialing in, or we'll make to see her later. I want to start by just thanking the board members for your for the honor of being your president for the next 2 months. It means a lot. I will do my absolute best to put the time in and to represent you all well. Thank you for flexing on the schedule and being here for this full board meeting that we added in. I want to talk for a second and then jump right in. But I want to talk for a second about the purpose of the meeting today, and then a few thoughts around ground rules, just to keep us on track. We don't spend enough time as a board really brainstorming the future, talking about what the major issues are that we need to focus on. We do it in bits and pieces. The committees do it. We do it as a board, but with the year coming to an end, with a new superintendent coming in the fall, I just thought it would be a good idea for us to have some discussion and general agreement, not specific, but general agreement on what our key issues are that we need to focus on. What comes out of this meeting will be a list. It won't be prioritized. It won't have how to get it done. It'll just be the list of focus areas for us. And we can refine it over the course of the summer and into the fall, and have basically some organized thoughts to share with the new superintendent. So for this meeting, I asked that only board members speak. I'm only going to recognize board members. Everyone else is certainly welcome to be here and listen only. But this is an opportunity for the board to roll its sleeves up and just exchange ideas. We have until 5:30 for the meeting. I'm going to call it as 5:30 sharp if we're not finished beforehand. We don't have to debate every issue that's raised. It's good if somebody raises an issue, if somebody says, yeah, I don't think that that's very important relative to other things, that's fair game. We're not trying to solve the issues here today, but solutions for it. It's just, let's identify what our focus areas are. We don't even need to prioritize them. I can get just kind of a general sense from the discussion on what some of the maybe the short list and the long list look like. And that will be shared back with you. And the executive committee too will signage that. And once we have the new board members or know what the board is going to look like for next year, we'll be able to put the right balance of people in the committees, and most likely a lot of these items will drop into the committees to any questions or concerns about this? So we sent out a list of potential areas for focus, and I hope that you had time to look at that, but I also hope that you just spent some time scratching your head and coming up with your own list. So with that, let's just go and let's hear what's on your mind. I'd like to hear from everybody eventually. If you want to throw one idea out, if you want to share your full list, that's fine. Who'd like to start?
Hey, thank you, Steve Reardon. I appreciate it. Read your outline, which
I'm sorry, Steve, before you get going, shame on me. Jose, welcome to the board.
Thank you.
We're delighted to have you, and apologies for not recognizing you right on your back.
That means he goes first. That means he goes first.
Right.
That means you go first.
He has to stand on the table and sing a song. All right, go ahead, Steve.
So, and this is not an issue as much as it is reflecting what you circulated, and more of an idea that I kicked around for a while. It's always occurred to me that one of the great benefits that VMI gives, and this is learned in barracks, when a cadet gets a status slip, it goes in and answers that true or false, and it then is issued his or her punishment, and then goes out and serves. I mean, that is always struck me as the essence of what VMI is trying to instill in our cadets, as a virtue of answering for your own conduct and being able to walk in and say whether it's true or not, and then take the medicine. And I've for the last 15 years sat on boards of secondary schools and have a lot of contact with the students that we're looking to bring here. And I would submit that sort of challenge is what the student that we want to get, and the student we often get, who wants their 4 years in college to be spent wisely in developing themselves, as opposed to someone who's just going to college. And that's really our niche. We need to make sure that we continue to get those students in the VMI. And so this, and I think it's an essential characteristic that's underpinned by the honor code. But it's really a matter of developing virtue in the person. And I think that is what that inspires people to want to come to VMI. And as the demographics change, we need to continue to inspire and to articulate to these high school students that this is the place to come to give you the grounding that you need to have a successful and fulfilling life. And so that is a practical virtue that we, I think, better than anybody, have the barracks structure to put in place. What I think is what I would see as an innovation maybe of this, but it's not so much innovation, is I think we need to also develop that intellectually in the students, and meaning that virtue in itself is an important thing to grapple with and to understand. And virtue in itself is the habituation to good. So you learn virtue so that you create habits that are aimed toward the good. And so when you elevate that sort of those ideas, when it inspires the cadets and potential cadets, but it also makes them answer, and think about questions of what is the good. And so that allows them to develop their own character and what they are going to be. And it also makes them answer and think about real questions. Because we know the cardinal virtues are prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, just to begin with, a long list of virtues. Giving a structure in which this can be discussed, articulated, explored, is creating an environment where they have to develop their own thoughts about what is the good, what is their it's what's important to them, as opposed to some ideology being pressed upon them. Not that that's what we're doing, but that's the concern. We don't want an ideology pressed upon anybody. We want to train them to reason and think for what the good is for themselves. So, what I'm proposing is that we take a hard look at that, of integrating that into leadership programs, our academics in some way. And I'm not dreaming this up out of whole cloth. There's a very excellent program that I've got some material from that I just happened to be the university in DC that I would suggest we look at a program on teaching virtue. There's a professor at the DC that I would think we might even want to engage and discuss about how this is being done, because I think that's how we inspire this younger generation to take the challenge that VMI normally has of putting through the rigor of all the things that we're all aware of. But we need to also get them to start thinking about who they are, what is important. And I think so that is my recommendation.
Thank you. Exciting and interesting. Appreciate that. That kind of leads, by the way, Megan's online now, so welcome. And I'll just see if anyone wants to run with how we brand and communicate and attract cadets, the right cadets that don't do ordinary. Anybody want to?
I'll say that really is the one part that I bring forward.
Good.
The question is, again, how do we as a board, how do we as an institute, what is the VMI image? And that's not only the image to current Corps of Cadets, what is the image of VMI to our alumni, to our communities, that's business communities, that's military community. That is, as Steve talked about, to those possible recruits. And we do know what VMI has over time branded ourselves very well. And it is to not do the ordinary. We know that we've gone through a period, and again, say with the Zoom hearing, and thanks for the suit to come in at a challenge time.
Right.
VMI was struggling with that due to media and otherwise. But I would say that is a core part. Is a small institute doing the ordinary that produces, so back to what Steve was talking about, producing leaders of character, are able to perform with academic excellence, that are able to excel within industry and within the military, and the institute shows that. I mean, have that, but for me, it comes down to telling the VMI story, to show the image that is not doing the ordinary, and that, by the way, will draw future cadets to the institute. And similar to military service, we do see a lot of generational VMI cadets. They saw that within grandfathers, great-grandfathers, uncles, cousins, brothers, sisters, so forth.
Thank you. We know that the future holds some rate of decline in the number of college-bound students. And so if we're going to maintain the core that we want, the right people in the right size, I agree with you. It's gonna be kind of doubling down on what's different about us. The character building piece.
How do we message that?
How do we
At our community. That's not only alumni, that's outside of our alumni. Institute.
So if thumbs there, everybody kind of thinking this might be kind of important. Jose, you had a comment?
Wanted to talk a little bit about the academic excellence point that you had. VMI has always been known as an institution that produces very good engineers. But our percentage of engineering graduates is decreasing for other programs. We need to relook at this. I think one of the things that I look throughout when I hire a lot of engineers from different universities is we're very good at the mechanics for train an engineer, whether it's structural, electrical, whatever. But when you come out of an engineering school, you never really know what you're going to be. Are you going to go into design, producing drawings? Are you going to go into construction? Are you going to go to work in a pharmaceutical plant or oil and gas plant to do process? I think we need to take a leap forward in our education of engineering here to introduce the cadets in engineering about all the different ways that you can go as an engineer. We will be ahead of many other schools by doing that, which means we can attract more people. And I'll be frank with you, my father was an electrical engineer. I became a civil engineer, but he worked in a manufacturing plant. When I came out, I started working in the design part and they moved to construction. I really started not knowing those things until I started working. If VMI were giving me more of that, I think I would have been more effective. I think VMI did a great job in educating me as an engineer. It's a great engineering school, but I think we need to do more. And that's part of the academic excellence. I think if we advertise that, say, this is the school where you can learn how to go and operate a plant, want to be a design engineer, you want to be into construction, this is how we're going to help you. But these are the courses you're going to take. Now, it's going to take a little bit of thinking out of the box of some of the professors that we need to bring in. Whether it's a construction management type professor, where there are electrical engineers, some of the professors will be more tailored to process engineering or mechanical. But I think that's a differentiator. We need to increase the number of engineers that come out of VMI. And when they come out of VMI, they need to know that they're well prepared to go in any of these avenues as an engineer. Which, by the way, for those that are in active duty, the generals here, when you come into the Corps of Engineers, you really do very little design work. You're going to be managing. So how about learning how to manage? Engineering management at VMI. You'll be better prepared.
Great thoughts. Thank you.
I'll chime in on the branding comment. I have wrestled with this for a long time, going back even to when General Budding was the superintendent. And it's always been my view that VMI's strategic challenge is demonstrating its relevance as a small school with no graduate program. And I know in a competition for resources where we have wonderful opportunities and universities in the Commonwealth, there are those who ask the question, why VMI? You're only at your best case 1,700 undergraduates. And I don't think any of us, any around the table or around the room, need to explain that relevance. And I think the history of what our graduates have done for the country over the last nearly 2 centuries speaks for itself. And yet I feel like we as a community have to be able to demonstrate that relevance, and if necessary, use words to borrow from a certain saying. But I think that goes to what General Ring's talking about, Steve Reardon's talking about, is how do we tell our story? and probably better yet, this would be the really secret sauce if we could pull it off. How do we get other people to tell our story for us in the way that we want it to be told? My feeling is that others have told our story for us in a way we don't want it told, and it's probably not a fair representation. But I think alongside everything else that we do here, important work we do here, being able to demonstrate why that matters for the Commonwealth, for the nation, that is something that we've got to find a way to get on a broader platform. And then younger generations are inspired to come here. And it's not merely relying on the folks who've had the benefit of seeing a relative go through here. And I had that benefit, but I know there are a lot of people sitting in this room who didn't, who came here. How can we reach that broader audience of potential cadets, potential faculty and staff? That to me is a challenge that I think we've got to begin to grapple with. I'm going to talk about it and take concrete steps towards making that happen.
So as I'm listening to Steve, Jose, and to Bernie talk, the idea came to my head that it's been a long time since I was 17 years old and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do after I graduated from high school and ended up here in Lexington. Right? Fast forward, when I was in the General Assembly for 10 years, I would meet other members of the General Assembly, senators and delegates, and they would find out there weren't very many VMI graduates in the legislature. There were only 3 of us at the time. And when another legislator or a colleague would meet me and they'd find out I went to VMI, invariably they would say, "Oh, you went to VMI? That's a great school. That's a really great school." Some of them were from Northern Virginia. Some of them were from Hampton Roads or South Side or Southwest. And I would always ask, I'd say, have you ever been to VMI? Have you ever seen VMI? Most of the time, the answer was no. They'd never set foot in Lexington. They'd never been in Rockbridge County. They'd never seen the barracks. And then I would follow up and I said, well, if you don't mind me asking, why you say VMI is a great school? Invariably, the answer was, oh, there's this great guy back in Fredericksburg named Joe Smith, class of 47, whatever. And he's just a really great guy. He's in my church with me. He's on the vestry. Or I work with a guy who went to VMI and now with a gal, right? The thing that we produce is not engineering degrees or engineering degree holders, really. The thing that we produce are graduates of Virginia Military Institute. And for some reason, my colleagues in the General Assembly seem to think that these were a special sort of people, special enough that their impression of what the school was invariably positive. It's been a lot of water over the dam since then. And I dare say that if we went up to Richmond now, we might not get the same answer from the senators and the delegates. But the reason I make this point is, I think as I think back from when I was 17 years old, I don't think what I was thinking about is, I want to get an English degree or I want to get a history degree. I wasn't thinking about it that way. And the very first time I set foot on post and saw VMI for the first time, I was thinking about what kind of man do I want to be someday? What kind of person do I want to be someday, right? And I think that's the thing that VMI has always had a unique competency to answer that question for a lot of young men and now young women is, I'm not going to Lexington necessarily because I want to get the best engineering degree or necessarily because I want to get the best English or history degree. I'm going to Lexington because I want to be the best possible version of the person that God intended me to be. And I know that, and I trust that at VMI, I'm going to achieve that objective, that goal, right? And it ties in with what Steve's talking about virtue, right? And if we're going to produce educated and honorable men, it begs the question, what do we mean by honorable? What are these virtues that we're trying to inculcate in them, whether they're going in the military or they're going to go into the private sector, right? What are the things that we're going to do with an engineering degree once we leave VMI and either go into the military or go on active duty or go out into the private sector to be an engineer. We don't come here to get an engineering degree. We come here to become an engineer. We don't come here to get an English degree. We come here to use the knowledge that we learned in the English department and in the history department to go out and be the best possible person we can be in or out of uniform. And I think that'll create the niche. There are very few schools, I think, very few colleges and universities in the United States today. And most of them are not government schools. They're not public schools. They're primarily private schools, Catholic schools, Christian schools. There's not a lot of these universities that as part of their marketing say, come here because we're going to teach you virtue. We're going to teach you, we're going to make you a better person by virtue of having been here. Few of the schools in Virginia, as part of their marketing say, please come to Blacksburg because you'll be a better man or a better woman when you graduate from this school. We have an ability now to once again reinforce the fact, you talk about beyond college or don't do ordinary. We've always had that sort of in our mindset, which is we're not like every other college. And we have to be that way now more than ever with the demographic cliff that Patty's mentioned. The riches are in the niches. We're going to compete for the best and the brightest of that dwindling universe of college-bound men and women. We have to be giving them something here in Lexington that they're not likely to get anywhere else, in Virginia certainly, or in the United States. And I think a focus that focuses in a way that other schools haven't focused for the most part. What kind of person do we want you to be when you graduate? Or what kind of person do we think you're going to be once you find out about these virtues and about you find out about yourself? That's going to place us at a competitive advantage against other colleges and universities. They're still talking in a conventional way about why you should come to Charlottesville or Blacksburg or Washington. That's not, if that makes sense. It's my sense of it.
You?
Teddy, first, this is a great idea. Thank you. This is a great discussion. It's always great to sit around this board and talk about concepts, and we don't do it much. So thanks. Great idea.
Thank you.
What I focus on in the years ahead or next year, and I rarely say this, but Bill Janus made a really great decision.
It hurts down here.
Blind hog.
But he's dead right, and about what makes us different, because we are different. We know that, and we have the tools here. We've always had them here to turn out special, unique graduates. So let's focus on what we have and have always had, and continue to make it better. What we have here that most schools don't focus on as much as we do is a curriculum, which is fabulous. Perhaps we do need to focus on more STEM or tweak it and think about different courses and so forth. But we have a co-curriculum. It's almost as important as the curriculum. We should celebrate and focus on our co-curriculum, which is everything that happens outside of the classroom and happens in the biggest classroom of all, the barracks. The co-curriculum is our RAT line, our regimental system, our class system, our honor system, our dike system. All of the things that provide leadership opportunities each and every day on this post that other schools don't offer. And that's why we at Base are a leadership institute surrounded by a curriculum and a military form of education. But we have a co-curriculum that is robust. Other schools have co-curriculums. They have club sports, they have varsity sports, they have other clubs, but our co-curriculum is what makes us special and what is the special sauce that turns out our unique graduates. So that's maybe next year when I'm not here tonight. Y'all focus on our co-curriculum.
Like that. Thanks.
I give you guys probably a different viewpoint because I'm not an alumni here. I think what I've learned in my 4 years is how to really appreciate the curriculum and the candidates and what they come out. But I think the biggest thing we need to focus on is how do you get the folks in Richmond to understand? Because when I am talked to, what I am talked about is all the negative things that we see in the paper, rather than what you see and what graduates out of here. And what happens in Richmond funds us. So if you ask me when I look at things, I am not one on military, I'm not gonna guess at. But you look at enrollment, because that's how you get funded. You look at alumni and you look at the state legislature. And I think that the biggest thing that I've seen, and it kind of goes back to marketing and branding. How do you get people to focus on the great people that have come out of here, the true leaders, rather than everything else that's going on at the outside? That's just my viewpoint.
So add on to him, how do you counter the negative narrative imaging, right?
Yes, sir.
Cover that, you kind of probably articulate better with that. I think the word is trust. How do we build trust with parents? They're gonna send their sons and daughters here. How do we build trust with the alumni? And how do we build trust with the General Assembly? So you just, I mean, I think you probably could add to that list or subtract that list, but though, I mean, we talked about it. You said, hey, you know, bringing these 17-year-olds here. Do the parents want those young men and women to come here? You know, they see them marching around, and is that what I want my son and daughter to do? And then the alumni, you know, they're going to be our sales agent. I mean, they're going to go out there and they're going to be in the communities. They're going to be in the churches and everything like that. They're going to say, hey, don't go to Lexington, you know, and just take a look at it. You know, I mean, it's not for everybody. And then, you know, the General Assembly, you know, can we build that relationship where they say, VMI, 1,700, you know, young men and women, we need to continue to fund this place fully and get the best men and women here.
And bro, just follow up on since I've been so involved with secondary education. So kids at every level almost, it's not like it was in the old days. So we need to speak, I think, directly to the kids and to their.
Sure, I agree with that. Yeah. But you know,
I understand, I mean, hopefully the parents have got some.
right, so I would, maybe I've got too many gray hairs, but I would hope that the parents would involve with the decision of where they want them.
Your parents had sway, my son would have graduated from VMI. Your parents had sway, my son would have graduated from VMI.
Well, my son actually, I mean, just a short story, we're getting off. My wife brought my son and 3 young men here, and my son didn't go, but 2 other kids in the car went, so.
I had sway, it just worked in the opposite direction as a grown.
Jim, did you have something?
I was just gonna say again, going back into that image. The image of VMI, we just talked about it, whether it's countering negative messaging. You know, frankly, I would say within the alumni alone, certainly we've seen that over the last several years of a deep split within alumni relative to speaking positively about VMI, the current state of VMI. It has historically the ties and bonds, alumni, whether you're a graduate or having been to VMI, that's part of their history. What's back in that image, that is, again, talking about, again, sharing, as Mr. Garcia said, within the General Assembly, we're struggling now because there's some mismessaging relative to the image of VMI as an institute within our legislative body that supports and funds this group.
Can I just add one more thing? I was going to, I just get the feeling, and be interested, the detachment of the ROTC units. I just don't see them as integrated as they were in the past. I mean, that when we were here, you know, I don't know the history of, you know, the TAC officers were from the ROTC unit, and now they don't come up here. So I think, you know, the ROTCs are a major part of VMI. We need to make sure that they're.
Damon?
Couple of thoughts, I kind of feel a little bit what Shanger said, particularly from standpoint of the you mentioned about the legacy. I come from a background, I didn't have anyone. Family standpoint, from the VMI. But I would say, Garcia is saying here about You see, some of the negativity was going on presently, and that's not gonna last forever. We know that. Because if we say VMI, we'll get through it all. We'll get through this. And that's kind of what you say. People will know why you for VMI, because they know they can get through the tough times. And that's what we're gonna do here. But a little bit of what Garcia was saying about, you know, negativity, we still gotta celebrate the successes that we've had, even with the sense of general wins. We gotta be positive in that category as well. Because not all negative, not all negative. Made tremendous progress, considering, you know, pandemic and all that kind of thing. It really set back the country in itself, and that's a you know, that's a world pandemic. You know, think about that. You know, you have kids thinking, or parents at that time, my kid's not going nowhere. My kid be safe. Yeah, I'm going back to VMI or any other college or university. I think from an image standpoint, I think VMI provides, which I think we could feed off of we talk about the three-legged stool. We're always growing up as cadets, 2 3-legged stool. We offer those 3 areas. Obviously, specialty to the degree, athletically, academically, strongest, and then for the military stuff. So we offer really 3 strong options for any cadet or student to come into VMI and excel in each of those 3 categories. Talk about. And all of it is all leadership. You know, how do we produce that, show that on the field, in the academic classroom, and then on the military side, and we get all those 3 unique opportunities. I think that's why people and I come across folks say, "You went to VMI?" Oh, damn, you know. That's why I didn't go to VMI. Yeah, that's really what the answer is. That's why I didn't go to VMI, because I didn't want to get challenged. You get challenged. And that's what we do. We see superintendents. You see what we have in the ambassador nations, chief of staffs, those folks. They speak for what VMI produces. So I think you know, I think the main part of this is, you know, what we provide from a leadership standpoint in all facets of life. And we try to take those, you know, when I was a college coach, and I would tell a kid, but when I was not coaching here at VMI, but when I was at other universities, they say you're giving up 4 years, 4 years of sacrifice, take care of 50 years down the road. Most players didn't understand that. But I try to explain that as well. You know, that's coach. I never thought that that type of challenge would be for me, you know, a person like myself. Because here you're involved in every aspect of the institute. There's no singling out. You can't hide. Even in this environment of what we consider VMI. So I think that's where, you know, we need to talk about the positiveness of that. So it's kind of how I see it.
Throw one out. Or go ahead down there, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Building a little bit on what Damon just said. I think we would all agree for the most part that probably our best graduate or one of our best graduates is George C. Marshall. And George C. Marshall, his relationship, and Keith, correct me if I get any of these historical facts wrong, but he was known for being a straight shooter, and there were times, you know, certainly, you know, his relationship with General Pershing was unique, and the reason it was as strong as it was because, you know, Pershing needed some straight feedback, and when in World War I, when he was over in France, he was getting a lot of
input from his staff that was politically correct, but it wasn't correct. And Marshall gave it to him straight. And from that point on, he trusted him. And it became an example of VMI in terms of you do what you believe in. And you stick to your guns, no matter what. People I've talked to over the years, other VMI grads and people have had interaction with them. What they've admired has been, you're going to get a straight shot. You're going to get the straight scoop from that person. They'll give it to you honestly. When everybody else is telling you everything's okay, that'll be the person that'll give it to you as accurately as possible. And it's what I've seen in my career and in my life. I think it's what distinguishes us from a lot of other schools and maybe even a lot of other military schools is that brutal honesty. And you know, I look at the last several years and you know, it's you know, the good news is you're dealing with VMI people. The bad news is you're dealing with VMI people. You know, the politics, the stuff that's occurred over the past few years, we've had people at the two ends and they're dug in. And you know, to some degree we made them that way because they're resolved where they are. I think that's quality that VMI produces, regardless of your political position. And I think what we've got to do a better job, and we got to focus on, is two things. One is with the legislature and somehow with the media is getting them to understand who VMI is, and that we say it the way we believe it, and try to get us positioned less as politically, more apolitically. And if you get an opinion from a VMI person, it's not because they're a Republican, it's not because they're a Democrat, it's not because they have some social position, it's because what they think. And I think it's a real strength for us. And somehow we've got to put resources and effort into building or rebuilding that image. I mean, we're tough on each other, and you know, that's part of the story. But you know, people that opposed in opposing viewpoints the last few years, they're not that they're bad people for the most part. There's a couple of definitely cross the line, but for the most part, they're just believing what they're doing. And some of them went too far, but I think that's a strength that exists. It exists with every single person at this table, and I think we got to do a better job marketing that and making people understand who we are. And I think that taps into what you said and what some others said here.
And Jim did illustrate that point in real time. If y'all didn't look at General Dan Kane's congressional testimony, it's everything you just said. Recognizing, if you know the history of that story of how he was appointed as the chairman of the Joint State Chiefs, his retired 3-star, just because he gave unvarnished direct counsel earlier POTUS during a military time struggling, then to bring that forward in apolitical, which his testimony really was brilliant on that point as a man of VMI character. And again, he heard Marshall more than once those points of virtue, character, and again, and success that we have now. Now his history is still being written. So we want to be aware of it. Sure. But look in retrospect, he's living that out in real time right now as the senior most officer in the standing military.
think we've got a really good mission statement. There's an awful lot that's going on that's really, really good. So I think one of the strengths that we have, and it really aligns with you, Dave, on is everything that takes place out of the classroom. So I think that we produce a young man or woman of honor who is at the right place at the right time with a well-developed work ethic, who can look older adults in the eye and immediately make an impact on wherever it is, whether it be the military or anything else. And I think it stands them by and large head and shoulders beyond their colleagues that are graduating from other colleges. I think the way that translates as you age a little bit over time is some of our graduates are going to lead extraordinary lives and attain extraordinary levels of success. But the overwhelming majority of us are going to lead ordinary lives. And I don't mean that in a pejorative manner. I mean that literally it's an ordinary life. There's nothing wrong with that. I think what VMI does for older people with a little bit more experience is it enables them to be extraordinary in living their ordinary life. And I think that links back to all of those things that contribute to our ability to fulfill our mission. And I look at our job at any time is to set the conditions to maximize our ability to fulfill our mission statement. And I think that that can touch everything from the brand to the relation with legislators to bringing our alumni closer together, just about anything you can look at. So that's the way I look at it.
Eddie, I'll add too, we've got this great roadmap. This is a really fabulous strategic plan the General Winds put together with our board's participation and oversight. And a lot of what we're talking about is right in here. So we've already got a really great roadmap thanks to General Winds. It's great work.
I can just share a personal story. It's not my personal story. It's one I think that resonates some of the folks that know some of the players. But to Jamie's point, yeah, you got your George Marshalls, and we've got plenty of those in our history. But there's a guy by the name of Flora who was in the class of 47-ish. I don't know that he ever actually graduated because World War II service interrupted his cadetship. And he's living in Roanoke. And sometime around 1974-75, a Vietnamese refugee named Lapte Chow moved to Roanoke. Mr. Flora's family adopted Lapte and his family. And Lapte was so impressed with this man and what he had done for his family that he wanted to come to the school that produced him. Lapte's my brother Red. And Lapte retired as a major general in the United States Army National Guard. I think when we talk about living extraordinary, being extraordinary and living an ordinary life, Mr. Flora is an example of that. But it's also what I'm talking about, if necessary, use words, because it's his personal example that influenced a young man who wasn't even from America to come to VMI and become a great American. And I think that's something that we don't necessarily give ourselves enough credit for doing. But there's a lot of that out there, and that's something that we've somehow got to, I don't know if we need to foster it more or just let it be known in a more direct way. With that, Jamie nailed it, and I think that's something that is unique. There may be other places in America where you'll see a Lapte standing on a parade ground in front of the class, the honor class 50 years before, who bled and died in Vietnam a lot. And there he is, a brigadier general, but a VMI graduate. Not that many places in America where that can happen, but only in America can that happen. So thank you for giving me that moment.
Yeah, thank you.
And next month, new Pak D, General, head of the Thai military, again, generationally there too, again, producing leaders, both ordinary and extraordinary. Class of 88. It's just, it's global. It's global. Amazing. And industry.
There is something though that worries me. You know, society has changed a lot, and the kids that are coming along nowadays are looking for direction. We have a great process here, which I don't think we should change at all. I do think we need to be aware that they are looking for something. They're looking for direction. And not everyone, but there's a, and so we need to give them substance as well as the process. That's why I am this act of virtue. It creates the environment in which they can reason to it themselves. And I do think we need to be providing them something. I fear for them otherwise.
Okay, Ernie, I'm gonna put you on the spot. In order for kids like that to come here, gotta be affordable. Weigh in on that subject.
Sure. And for those who've been around the table for a while, you know that it's something that I've raised before. As someone who was an out-of-state cadet, I had the benefit of scholarship that made it possible for my brother and sister to go to other schools, but it is something that I think we frankly struggle with. And not in a way that we're falling short. It's just, it is a challenge to be able to provide the education we provide and make it affordable for the young people who are looking for this. To me, I think that we can call it financial institutional health, but the ongoing challenge that we have is keeping food affordable at the top line and with financial aid resources. Yes, based on need, but yes, based on other things as well. And that thorny problem intersects so many different things, whether we're talking about how we'll set tuition and fees later this week, how to fund a Division I athletics program that is competitive, but is also not a drag on the overall resources. The state has been very generous with us over the last several years in a time of economic plenty. But we know historically that when the economy downturns, that the state cannot be that generous. So then how do we fill that gap? We've had wonderful private support. And we need to continue that. But I think, frankly, private support is the lever that makes up the difference when the Commonwealth has to hunker down a little bit in a negative economic time. And so how do we bring all these pieces to bear? And how do we do it in the near term? And then how do we project that for the long term? I think those are very difficult questions. This board's got to address them. And I bet you 10 years from now, that board's going to have to address them, but we can't ever take our eye off that ball. And my own view is that particularly with out-of-state top line costs, if we haven't already crossed over the line of sustainability, we're at that very hairy edge. And holding that line is essential to being able to attract and retain out-of-state cadets that we absolutely have to have. And not just for today's core, but for tomorrow's alumni base. So I'll throw that out there, and I'm sure it's red meat in front of the bull. So
can I make a comment on? Yeah, I think that's spot on. And you know, I'll say this. I think we need a well-coordinated, synergistic effort between the agencies and the school in terms of going out and aggressively trying to bump up that endowment. And I think we got to be incredibly aggressive in terms of the number that we're going after. I think it's got to be a target that approaches $2 billion. You look at Hillsdale College, you look at some of these other colleges that are out there, they're aggressively building these endowments, and they're unique schools like VMI. And I think the money's got to come, it's got to come from beyond the alumni. The alumni are going to be able to produce only so much, but there's a lot of billionaires out there that could easily contribute money to the school. And I think we need a concerted program to go after that money. And we've got to set an incredibly aggressive target. Necessity is the mother of invention. I think we've got to find a way to do it. I think you look at schools like Hillsdale and some of these others that are out there doing it. I think Hillsdale's and they're about the same size as us, and their endowments probably 50% bigger, if not more. And there's other schools like that. I did some research not too long ago looking at it. And money's a huge goal here for us to preserve our culture and grow it. And we can't do as we've always done. We've got to change it up. Got to change it up. That's my view.
Other thoughts around finances?
Looking at peers, Citadel was scheduled to have a tuition increase. And they came back and they had 0 increase for in-state and a small increase for out-of-state. And Norwich University went 0 increase in tuition. I don't know the details how they did that. But that's something that perhaps we need to study, how were they able to do that in these environments? So obviously, I don't believe the Citadel's suffering with their sports teams. I think they're still supporting what they do. Norwich is a different story, what they do, but I do agree with Ernie that this is a big deal. I mean, I was an out-of-state cadet, and the comparison of cost between in-state cadets is significant. And we do need to attract the out-of-state cadets in.
Somebody shared there, it's really, again, that the board needs to, the institute to focus on programs that facilitate building. And so part of it, as you just said, Jim, that is that we're seeking investors, donors, even outside our community, but it is that we're leveraging and increasingly leveraging programs that drive the formula. It's more OTC scholarships. It's Virginia Guard tuition assistance. That is looking at scholarships. I mean, all the way around there, which they're all. There's no specific one, but driving affordability through leveraging. And the institute does pretty well, and frankly, it's getting better.
Does that, some finances and how we can leverage outside dollars, just programs, for example? Does that open the door for post secondary, graduate type programming that we talked about, may consider other revenue sources in reference to the graduate program? I know a lot of it boils down to, everyone wants to, if we had it, if we had a graduate program, do want that VMI experience. Who's on the outside. At the same time, I'm sure we probably could work, just talking out loud here, work in a program where someone should have to get a part of the leadership of that VMI graduate program, could be part of it, because some persons that people in our life, hey, I probably would want to VMI. And there's an opportunity now for me to really get a VMI, piece of VMI. You also still get experience a little bit from leadership standpoint. I mean, it's all about leadership in itself, but I didn't know that might be a avenue for talking finance, academics.
Certainly, is one that's worth looking at. I'm not sure, I've never seen, we'd have to put a model together on whether that would be a money maker or a money. How long would it be before it started generating money? Put a lot into resources and facilities up front, but it's definitely something to consider.
But online, you're talking about online, that's big example with that street down here in Lynchburg. Biggest one.
Yeah, pretty.
Yeah, good. The purpose is money that is looking to see if it is a moneymaker. Yeah.
I have a question for Eddie or Ernie. I mean, because I know you, are we with, we would say peer colleges, at least in our own mind. Are we overpriced? Are we under, I mean, are we, where do we stand
So the research that I've done, and I've had a lot of help from members of the staff here, I would say the answer is not as crystal clear as you'd like it to be. But I think where we stand is with what is advertised out there, there's a bit of black magic associated with what people really talk about in terms of the cost you pay. In-state, probably center mass. It's probably where we want to be, from my own perspective. For out-of-state tuition, amongst Virginia schools, we tend to be on the more expensive end. I'm going to say this, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but for purposes of illustration, I think UVA with Mary probably more expensive than we are. Tech is less expensive to the out-of-state student, so on down the line.
Got it.
Got
the chart here.
What's average? I mean, Norwich is private, so their numbers are just apples and oranges. Citadel and A&M, who I would say are probably our closest competition rivals is senior military colleges. They're out-of-state pricing. Top line is advertised as lower than ours. Again, there's some apples and oranges in there, but even when you try to even it out, we're probably still more expensive. Not by as much, but still more expensive than most. Obviously, the environment that A&M offers, much like for cadets and tech, it's going to be a different environment. So there's some intrinsic things in there as well. In round terms, that's where we line up.
But I think that's important to consider. I get it for the outer states. Zero increase scares me because I've seen institutions do that thinking it's going to increase. And I don't think that's normally the effect. Sometimes there's what's wrong, attitude. And that's why you see these black magic, because a lower tuition sometimes indicates an inferior product. So it's all very careful, but from a bottom line standpoint, I think we have to make sure that zero out something for a little while, how it affects the bottom line.
Well, absolutely, and that probably have a semester-long tutorial from Dallas on how budgeting works, because all these things intersect. But in simple terms, to me, there's basically three or four income streams from a revenue perspective. State support, private support, tuition and fees, and then a small percentage of other, and that's probably a lot comes from the athletic department in terms of agencies.
So you have grants too, and other things coming in, right?
I mean,
How about like the RTCs?
well, that's what I'm saying. The tuition and fees, I count the RTC money as paid. We're not worried about who's the bill payer. We're just saying from our revenue, it's coming from that. And the challenge that we have, I think, is that as all our costs go up, and in the ordinary course, especially in an inflationary economy, and if state support doesn't continue to go up, you've got really two other ways of making that up: tuition and fees and private support. And my fear, my concern is that parents are only going to pay so much, especially on an out-of-state basis. If we get out of balance, the in-state, out-of-state, then we've got another complication of our finances. So we've got to keep our in-state, out-of-state balance. And part of the toolkit of doing that is keeping an out-of-state tuition at the top line that is within reach.
Are we offering enough assistance to the out of states that will make it up somewhere there?
It depends. It depends. I mean, I think we do a good job on need-based, but need is only below a certain threshold. You've got ROTC that comes into play. And so it's not a simple binary answer. But I do think the higher that top line gets, harder it's going to be to answer that question to attract out-of-state cadets to come. And I don't think we're in that boat yet with in-state. Certainly, if we get too unaffordable from an in-state perspective, we have the same challenge. We haven't hit the ceiling yet, as far as I'm aware, but I know in times past, expensive private schools from an RTC perspective DoD says, yeah, we'll pay tuition up to a certain number, then the rest is on you. And we don't want to be in that position either, because I think part of our secret sauce is our deep connection with the DoD. But if from an out-of-state perspective, we get too expensive for DoD on a tuition basis, then that connection will fray. And that's not what
I'm gonna call you now and say, now we're starting to try to solve the problem.
I'll stop.
That,
Although if you can solve the problem, should it?
write it down. What else? Cadets, core issues, anything?
Yeah, I'll speak up. I know we've talked a lot about up and out, but looking down and in, I think we hit on at the very beginning, but just defining a culture. As having been the guy that the cadets answered to and held accountable, I think one of our strengths, or it should be, is that cadets are held accountable for our actions. As a father of a fourth classman who's actually getting to be in here tomorrow, that's what I want from VMI. I want them to hold my son accountable. That's what makes us different than other institutions. Because I tell you, living here in Lexington, and I know y'all know, there's not much that Lexington offers compared to a Blacksburg or a College Station. So we've really got to focus on what's unique. Why would a young man or woman want to come to this institution, or what they want to get out of it? Personally, I think they want it to be hard. They want a challenge. If they didn't want a challenge, they wouldn't go here. They would go to Tech, where the party life is right down the street. So I think we've got to look at that. I think we've got to look hard at what our current culture is in the core. And I define that as what we do and or what we accept and what we teach. And I think there's some things that I think we could all tighten up a little bit. If we value attention to detail, if we value punctuality, if we want our graduates to show up on time, I think we need to look at that. I think back in the day, it was common for a formation to occur at TAPS, at least in my cadetship, and the entire Corps would be in JM Hall at TAPS. Nobody was late. I question if that would happen right now. So punctuality is just an indicator of the culture of what we accept. I think we need to take a look at that going down and in. I know this is a touchy subject, but going to your big issues and focus areas that I think we owe ourselves to look at is NCAA. And it's nothing against our athletic cadets or staff, but the environment has fundamentally changed since 2020, 2021, when NIL and the transfer portal changed the NCAA environment. And to my understanding, the Institute has not done any reframing, if you will, of that. Is that correct? So I think one of the best things that BMI or our board could do coming up is to step back and look at that, understand the environment, the impacts that it's had to NCAA athletics as a whole. And I think we're all familiar with that. And then how does that impact BMI's teams? And you mentioned how do we maintain BMI competitiveness? So that's a totally different ballgame than it was 5 years ago. And I think we need to do that honest assessment. And then if we decide to get to a competitive spot, what's it going to take and the impact that may have against the core and what we hold dear and dear.
I share some of those same concerns on both the athlete and non-athlete side, just raising the bar. On and off post. Seeing too many cadets fully in proper uniform uptown. One is too many. But from an NCAA standpoint, it is a different ballgame today with NIL. The portal was hard enough. NIL, I think it's a fair question to ask. It's, how do we build a competitive team of athletes who are getting paid and can leave when they want. And they're here to be cadets first, athletes second. How do we do that? Can we do it? It's a fair question.
If you, just to talk about competitive. If you didn't see the results of the baseball team Williamsburg game last night, I tell you, every VMI alumni should be proud. Those guys were down 7-0, I think, and came back. And came back and won in the bottom of the ninth. It's a pretty spectacular how they would stay competitive all 9 innings.
Eddie?
Yes.
Yeah, we talked about it earlier. I think it's a fair question. I think we got to get the right experts involved in looking at that because, it's a funny thing. VMI, it was only a couple of years ago, produced a Southern Conference championship team. Baseball's doing great. Basketball bounced back from losing a lot of people. It's amazing what athletics has been with VMI over the years. So, and I do know that when Donnie White and General Bunting pushed us from the Southern Conference into the Big South, that ended up being a disaster. Bobby Ross had suggested they don't do that. And so we got to look at it carefully because we've shown that we can compete, but not all the time. And we've had some bad seasons, but I think we got to look at that. One last comment I've got. I think as a total organization, and Dave, I'm sorry, 20 some odd years, working with you guys in the agency. So I tend to come back to you once in a while, but and I believe there's an initiative underway, but I think we got, if we're gonna walk the walk and we're gonna say this is what VMI is, our alumni also have to walk the same walk. And I know there's some work being done in that space, but I know the class 73's done some work there and there's others. But the last few years, there have been on both sides of the fence some alumni that have definitely crossed the line in what's acceptable behavior in terms of what they've communicated, insults that they've fired at people that either are on one of the boards or the administration, and that's not okay. And the public sees that, and that works against the message that we're sending who we are. And so I think there does need to be some accountability for that. And I know from having been on the alumni board that alumni can lose privileges for going too far. And I think that's got to be part of the plan, is if somebody gets out there, is issuing a threat or an insult or something that is not becoming of an alumni, certainly wouldn't be okay for a cadet, then we've got to show that our product is what we say it is. And so I think that's got to be part of this, is the agencies are going to have to help. And, certainly the Alumni Association, Matt and his team have got to carry that forward and complete that.
Okay, we've got 15 minutes left. It's time for the speed round. Keep the ideas flowing, but tighten up on the explanation. How's that?
They have to be short. I'm out.
Yeah. Bill, have the next 15 minutes off.
I think the secret sauce, if I say this, flying in to DC yesterday, I sat next to this gentleman, he's about 10, 15 years older than me, but he went to Appalachian State. And he said, "You went to VMI?" He said, "Ron Carter." I've never seen a basketball player play like that for such a small school. he was amazing. And he just kept talking about how great VMI was, and he wrong corner, what a guy. And again, secret sauce, like in a small school succeed in sports.
Classes
Wanted to share
today,
that.
You should see when he matriculated.
I'll just add, another one on the athletics front. I just. We've had some success. When we look at success, we can't take our eye off how are they doing in the core? Athlete, non-athlete divide, discipline, and so on. So the two have to go hand in hand. We've got an issue with football right now. Identified it. If they're winning every game, but 125 cadets on the team are racking up an average of 65 demerits for a semester, it's not acceptable. 20% of them have over 100. I don't care how many, personally. So cadets first, athletes second. Can we be successful today and do both?
Tying that together with the question about NIL and the portal, et cetera, we talk about this three-legged stool. Right? And athletics is one of those legs, right? But the only way a three-legged stool works is if all three legs are the same length. What is the importance of athletics vis-a-vis the other aspects, the military aspects and the academic aspects of it? And if we elevate any one of those three legs to sort of a golden calf and make it paramount, then there's not balance, right? The first superintendent of the founders of VMI, I think, decided to make VMI a military school at the time because they had a really situational problem. There was an arsenal here and they wanted to get the soldiers out and replace them. But there was never this idea that the military was an end in and of itself. But up until World War II, really, the military program at VMI was not an end in and of itself, like it would be at West Point or the Naval Academy. It was a means to an end. The idea, the thinking was the discipline of the drill field carry over into the classroom. The discipline of the barracks carry over into the laboratory. I think when we look at athletics, look at the military, when we look at academics, each of them is essential to what we're trying to the kind of person we're trying to produce here. But each has to be in its right proportion to the other two. And we have to ask some real fundamental questions then. In the advent and the aftermath of NIL and the portal, is Division I athletics placing in the right perspective? Or would the athletics, we look at the success of some of our non-Division I athletes here. And they've got the three-legged stool as well as anybody else. Our rugby team, for example. Everything's got to be on the table. We have to look at it and say, if our goal is not just to produce people with engineering degrees, if our goal is not just to win baseball games, but if our ultimate goal is to produce the best kind of young men and women that are going to go out into the world and the rest of the world is going to see that they're different and they're unique people, then everything's got to be on the table to look at it. It's really an existential question. We have to have the military here, we have to have athletics, and we have to have academics, but each has to be in equipoise and balance.
Anybody that hasn't spoken up or
Say a quick word. I mean, I came in thinking of the weeds, I think because I was given a list and it's a good list. And I think it's ambitious, but also probably necessary, each of the items that you have on this list. And so I came in thinking about a particular focus of a specific committee and probably a little too much of the weeds and compliance issues, which I do want to talk about, but I don't think this is necessarily the right place. But I am inspired by the discussion of character and virtue. And I am so highly appreciative of hearing that and taking the pause in our regular programming and the weeds, which is where I normally get, kind of pulled in. That I would just say a top line, I can't believe I'm saying this and my husband will not appreciate it, but I am delighted to invest the time in these types of bigger picture brainstorming conversations that I think we do need to have as a board. And I think as a board, we need to engage in more between full board meeting thought in most of the areas that we're engaging on. And I would rather put more of that time in the committee structures, meeting a little bit more frequently between meetings to be able to open up more of a forum for this kind of discussion, because I think it's incredibly important and it's so easy to get pulled into the weeds and get pulled into defense. And in a lot of ways, the budget feels like defense. And then it is to be able to sort of open up with the optimism that surrounds the ultimate character that this institute builds. So I don't think that adds to your list, but I'll say I'm sold on the process.
I like that. Thank you.
Speak really quickly. I think two things that are kind of more in the weeds. So the cadet leadership piece is what makes VMI so special. And that's why we're not West Point. West Point cadets are being run by the Army. Great, they're doing a great job. VMI is special because VMI is being run by the Corps cadets. That's the leadership piece. That's what helps them graduate and talk to the CEO and stand up straight and run the world. That we cannot lose sight of that. That's what makes this place special. And we need more women. We need to set a goal of having 25% women. I think all the academies have goals. Let's bring them in here. But hey guys, we don't have any mentors here. I'm not saying that, that's wrong. We need more mentors here for these women. We need to see some female officers here that they can talk to and discuss. And what does it look like to have a baby in the military and have a family and have a career? They've got that at the academies because they're yanking them in there and they're there. We need that here for these women. We need some support. We need some encouragement. We need some more can do. Be here, so those are my two little pieces. Athletics, we're gonna get that budget in order. When I look at the charts and it's like, oh, we were making money 6 years ago or like how do we get from there to here? So we can absolutely get that fixed and we've got to get that fixed support. So that is my little piece. I'm gonna tell you a little 30-second story. My son was recruited here to run with 5 kids from our county, and Matthew Pazier is an awesome guy, and he left after Christmas. He left before he finished the rat line, and there was no talking him out of it. He ended up going to 5 different colleges. He went into the active Army. He did this, that, and the other. That boy, since he left on December 18th, to this day, if you see that young man, he is wearing something that has VMI on it, whether it's shorts. The best thing he has done in his life was come and run at VMI for 6 months. And he didn't finish the rat line and he didn't graduate from here. So keep that in mind. It is a special place, even if they don't graduate. And we need to tell the world.
Great. All good points.
I have one question on it, is that when you're doing that and looking about the benefits of athleticism, I think you need to see how many students you may lose from enrollment that come because of athletes and scholarships. I think that to me, I would really want to understand by cutting if you have a $500,000 deficit and you lose 40 students, you have to pull up, you better start thinking really hard.
Good point.
The other issue is minorities. A lot of minorities in the athletics.
Just about out of time. I'll add one more based on some of what y'all have been saying. What I hear is we all I think, share a common view of what makes BMI special. And we all say we need to tell a story. A lot of negativity in the press. If you go back over the last 5 years, you'll see negativity in the press, you'll see negativity in a split alumni base. People on every end of the spectrum upset at one time or another. Somebody earlier mentioned trust. There's a lack of trust. There's no lack of enthusiasm for the cadets. I think the board has a trust issue. And I think that we can help mend some fences and repair some things if we kind of reconfirm what's important to us. What is it? You know, we just talked about what BMI is about. Board, I think, reinforces that, says, you know, we have our differences. We don't agree on everything, but here's what we do agree with. And this is why we're on the board. This is why we put in the time. It's because we all think BMI is a special place, and it's special for the reasons that we all have seen. They haven't changed. So maybe that's something that we could work on is saying, you may not agree with everything the board has done, but here's what we believe is important. Reinforce the things that are important, and alumni also feel is important. Thanks.
Megan, do you want to chime in?
Megan, if you're still on,
I am still on. The last 2 minutes, I'll try to keep this very, very short. I don't know if you guys can all hear me. I want to say that I agree very much with what Kate said about dedicating time and energy to having these kind of broader discussions. I think it's very easy to get caught up in the weeds about everything that's going on in the day-to-day, especially with all the external pressure. But I think having these conversations are aspirational and inspirational conversations are quintessential. And some of the things that I've heard consistently throughout all of this is what makes the Institute so special is this focus on accountability and transparency. And I think that we have to hone in on that, both kind of down and also up and out. I would also say, just as we're thinking about what makes the Institute so unique in terms of both the experience and the product, is that people in this day and age are looking for a crucible, something to test them. And this is especially true of young men. And Nancy, I love you talking about women. Obviously, I'm a woman that went to the academy. I wouldn't necessarily say that we are great at having mentors for women yet. I think we're getting there. But I would say what we want to focus on is just quality, irrespective of sex or irrespective of ethnicity or socioeconomic background. What we want to tell these cadets that are coming here is you're going to be tried and tested, and you're going to emerge so much stronger and more capable. And the Institute offers that in a way that nothing else does, to include my alma mater at the Academy, because it means you have to go into the military. You don't have to do that at VMI. And I think what we need to be promoting is that crucible experience, because you just can't find it anywhere else. And I'll leave it at that.
and it just turned 5:30. Megan, what a great ending. Thank you. And we'll see you in a little while.
Can't wait to see y'all. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone. The meeting is adjourned, and if you are 5 minutes. Okay, we'll restart the live stream in 5 minutes for a brief executive committee meeting. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.